Dooby dooby dooba dooby dooby dooba dooby dooby dooba dooby dooby dooba. Alex, he's a semi-psychotic, quick-thinking mammal of action. Nemo, Nemo, Nemo. He's an anti-small talk genius who never will flinch from debate. He's got more than just mad skills. He's got an intellect and a will. And the women swoon whenever they hear him say, "You're not an unattractive human." He's Alex! Alex the wisdom nerd! Alex! Agent I! The inconceivable one. First off, I think it's reasonable to deem myself the king of throwbacks with that intro. Because man, Phineas and Ferb were actually the best. Solid 7 out of 10 show. You know, I think this Life of Email is going to be a more interesting than most. It's definitely longer than most, and by longer, I mean clocking around about 14,500 words. And more stuff happened, so I have more to talk about. Plus, if nothing else, I'm going to include some stuff I wrote way back in my SE days, which, upon reviewing such material, I have no choice but to include, as that was the height of my creative writing career. So yeah, buckle up, Buttercup, and let's dive into it. Upon the completion of my last Life of Email, there was a significant amount of anime. First, I watched some anime with Mom and Grace, because we were working through the anime together at that time. After I watched some anime with Mom, and we ate sushi, which is a good fitting food for anime, I might say. And then I talked with William, the legendary Varley, at the end of which, you guessed it, I watched more anime. It's at times like these, times I have to write anime in every sentence of every paragraph, that I wonder if I'm a healthy human being. And then, after I've genuinely questioned my relationship to anime for about full, 2 seconds, I then enter into a justify my relationship to anime stage, and I feel my cognitive dissonance melt away as I conjure a myriad of good reasons why anime is there to soothe my soul. Of course my relationship to anime is healthy. I was crazy to even question it. The following morning, Joe spontaneously teleported to my basement, and therein I recorded my life update email with him staring at me the whole time, which I will say could have gone better. I got all self-conscious and messed up way more because of him. After that, Neo came over and he joined us, and we talked D&D stuff. Both Joe and I are pretty hyped about our characters, but at this point, I'm not even sure if Neo's campaign is going to happen, so that's a maximal sad. After some of that, I took them out for Wendy's and played VR, and we didn't do much. Honestly, it was a pretty boring time. Plus, it was also during this time that I started experiencing some serious pain in my front tooth, and thus I couldn't really focus on anything that was happening. Once that all ended, everyone went to their respective abodes, and Grace and I watched anime till 1 in the morning. Then began my body's revolution. See, long ago, in a distant time past, I encountered 2 other mass biological governing entities, known to me as Ben and Sam. Together, they formed an alliance, and they did it so often that one might call it even an obsession. They would summon their elite military force, the Moo Seals, and attempted to use them to wrestle in submission my nation. Of course, given the biological mass that I governed was more mature, my Moo Seals were hyped up on the performance-enhancing drug called testosterone, while Ben and Sam's research department had yet to discover this drug. Thus, they never won. Well, during one such joint takedown attempt, I, in a retaliation maneuver, happened to accidentally utilize my facial grinding apparatus as a battering ram against Ben's spinal region. And no, I did not bite his back. Well, intentionally speaking. Thus, as a result, one of my foremost facial grinding apparatus units was killed in action, and that was the end of it, or so I thought. It turns out, however, that a few members of the massacred unit did in fact survive, and took it upon themselves to mount an insurrection against me. Their esteemed ruler, out of pure spite for what I had done to their comrades. They lay in waiting, gathering strength for the past 6 years, until finally the time had come for them to strike. Now at the time, of course, I didn't think too much of it. After all, I had experienced numerous insurrections before. I would simply schedule an airstrike and once it arrived, take Advil to suppress the rioters. But little did I know. Anyway, so basically my tooth is not loving me, and I'm in some considerable, though not debilitating pain. During this time, I went over to Joe's house to observe and slightly assist in the Life of Email editing process. Joe really wanted me there because misery loves company. But I ended up going home before we were done because my tooth was seriously hurting. Once I got home, I took some Advil, played some Minecraft just trying to get my mind off the pain, and it was steadily consuming my face. As the day wore on, the pain started getting seriously severe. Like I took 4 Advil and felt the same as I did before. The same being absolutely horrible. At this point, I couldn't play Minecraft or even watch anime because the pain was like all I could think about. In hindsight, it's actually really weird how that works. It's almost as if pain takes up mental space. Like a little bit of it, and you can just shove it in the corner and go about your day, using your mental control room like normal. But when it gets strong enough, it's like your mental control room just gets packed with it. So much that you can't focus on anything except trying to get rid of it. In hindsight, a good reminder of how we're fundamentally embodied souls, but at the time, more like actual death. So yeah, around 4, Mom pulled out some real strong painkillers she had from when Ben got his wisdom teeth out a while back and gave me some of those, but even they didn't stop the pain. They just reduced it to a level where I could hobble around. About that point, we decided we should probably get me to the hospital. So, with me clutching my face the whole way, I hobbled the car and we journeyed to the ER. But there's something I've got to say here. And that's when you're dying in pain and unable to do anything but clutch your jaw and focus on anything else. It really sucks to have an incompetent caretaker. Like, don't get me wrong, I would rather have mom than no one. But still, mom had no clue what to do, and she couldn't even remember how to get to the ER. It was genuinely vexing in the moment. Anyway, we make it to the ER, and they sit me down to bed, do all the typical, you're a human tests. And then they don't show up for, like, I kid you not, 45 minutes. For like 45 minutes, they just leave me there waiting. And I mean, sure, I'm not in a life or death situation, but it's agonizing pain. And still, to take 45 minutes to get a painkilling shot? So yeah, also vexing, though of course at the time, I didn't really have the mental capacity to be upset. Finally, after 45 minutes, they come back, give me this painkilling shot, which brought the pain level down from agonizing to debilitating, and debilitating to, this just really hurts. After that, they prescribed me some narcotics and sent me home until I get to the dentist. Thankfully, I had the wherewithal to schedule a dentist appointment right when my tooth started hurting because that's something that super sucks about being poor. So since I'm medicated, I don't have like a personal doctor or anything. So what that means is, even if I'm in excruciating pain, I have to wait for an appointment. The same way, the guy waiting for a cleaning is. Thus, my policy has become sense pain anywhere for more than a day, obviously with some common, sense restrictions like just being sore from a hard workout. Then schedule an appointment with the relevant doctor. Because even if you take the first available slot at some ungodly hour in the morning, I assure you it will be a literal week before you can actually see anyone. Doing it this way means that even if you have, do have something that will actually just fix itself, then by the time your pain is super serious, you're a week ahead of scheduled appointment finally rolls around, and you can get it dealt with. And if it's something your body does fix on its own, you can just cancel the appointment and leave it open slot for someone else without the foresight to have done it sooner. It's a god tier strategy, if I ever came up with one. So yeah, basically that night hardcore sucked because the narcotic only worked for about 4 hours, and I could only take one every 8 hours, so I alternated between using it and 4 tablets of Advil. And while the narcotic worked pretty well, the Advil definitely did not. Hence it was a pretty darn rough night. Also, I must add that since I have taken narcotic, that now means I have taken drugs. However, the experience was more weird than enjoyable. Also, when the narcotic kicked in, everything started smelling like black ice, like the car air freshener thing. It was very weird. So yeah, that night was absolute death, just waiting for the morning when my dentist appointment would come. I watched anime with Ben until like 2:30 in the morning, just trying to distract myself, and then until 4 when he went to bed. After I took my narcotic and got a bit of sleep before waking up with some serious pain. Gosh, I gotta say that. 1, waking up in pain is the absolute worst. And 2, the rebels in my facial grinding apparatus must have access to some real-world equivalent of nuclear technology because, gosh, I don't think, I've ever experienced worse pain in my life. It was actually so bad. So yeah, I made it through the night and was driven to Comfort Dental where they numbed me and prescribed me some antibiotics in addition to the one the emergency room gave me. Right, forgot to mention that. And I almost fainted during the numbing process. Apparently, I went into, baby shock, so that was fun. Basically, it said the root canal would be tricky, so the doctor told me to go to a specialist. Thus, nothing else dental happened that day. The rest of the day, I intermittently spent trying to catch up some sleep that I lost last night and watching some anime to distract me from the pain. However, as evening rolled around, the antibiotics had done their work and my pain level had dropped down to pretty annoying, which was so nice. Honestly, holy cow, you don't know how beautiful and excruciating pain to your life is until you lose it. But yeah, in my less pain state, I finished an anime with the family, ate some food, played a bit of Minecraft, and then watched some anime with Ben until 1 in the morning, after which I slept for ages. The next day was so much better. I mean, don't get me wrong. It kind of felt like I had an eternal bad headache. But again, such an improvement from what I felt before. I felt like heaven. So yeah, I wasn't feeling 100% by any means, and thus I wasn't really productive. But I did manage to sort another 120 or so instrumental songs on my playlist, as well as work a bit on my Minecraft castle. Other than that, I just mostly watched anime. Until Joe and Kayla visited me in my healing state, and we did every useless website there was. There was this one that was just a series of texts about how the site was not going to jump scare you, and we waited for over 10 minutes. At least as far as we got, there wasn't a jump scare, for reals. The next day, I tried to be a bit productive. I worked on my life history thing, which we were doing for the trip. However, I didn't get too much done. The rest of the day, I spent watching anime and playing Minecraft, though I did watch the Chinese Marvel movie with a fan that night. The day after, I literally just copy and paste the day before, minus the movie. And as it stands, I get enough comments about how I end each day by noting, I slept, so you know what, I'll spare you. By this point, my tooth was basically not in pain, as long as nothing touched it. So I was still having to eat soft foods and stuff, but life was definitely, looking better. But this was also the day that I had my root canal scheduled. So as you might suppose, I thought it felt worse. So first of all, it's worth mentioning Alan is the guru of all knowledge. And during his daily dose of guru, he discovered a new method of root canals that's a bit better. And there's a money saver plan thing, which only saved $50 in the end. But hey, that's still something. So he helps up. Anyway, my mom drove me to the root canal place, and it was mucho posh. Not saying that's a bad thing, it was just quite the change from Comfort Dental. So yeah, they laid me back and asked me if I wanted nitrous oxide, which both mom and I thought would knock me out. So I was like, it costs an extra $100? Sure. Oh, it's worth the extra $100. But no, it does not knock you out. It makes you feel weird, so it was a waste of $100. I ended up listening to Pets, the mad movie about the skinny and fat dog, while people drilled a hole in my tooth, and it was great. I mean, to be fair, it didn't hurt. It just felt like someone was pushing on my tooth really hard, but it was definitely more than 10% disconcerting that someone was literally drilling into you. Not my favorite thought. So yeah, I got through that and felt a bit weird going home. Thanks, weird gas, but mostly tired. It was pretty painful the night after. I had to take a narcotic, but it went away pretty fast, and my tooth was just back to it hurts if it touches something, which was really nice. The other thing that happened that night was I started watching Your Lie in April. Yep, it's an anime with the whole family, and I also began work on my phone case. I'm pretty sure I talked about this whole thing before. Caleb and I are competing, yada, yada, yada. However, seeing as I have now finally completed the phone case, I feel as I have something new to say. Well, I mean, I always have something new to say, but, that's true regardless. I shall now describe the process of making a phone case, and you will witness my creative genius. I was considering showing the case step by step as I went through the life of email, but then I realized I didn't remember what I did, so that wasn't really an option. Thus, we're doing it this way. I started off by sawing off a chunk of wood, a bit more than the height of my phone, and then drawing on said wood the part I would need to hollow out based on my handy-dandy ruler measurements. I will say, trying to be precise with just a normal ruler is very hard. Also, trying to measure things with rounded edges, like a phone, is mucho harder. So, I measured stuff out, and then calculated all the places I would need to drill to hollow out the center of the block of wood most effectively, and here's the picture you can see. Boop. I then promptly ignored all that calculation work and just started drilling holes within the lines. See, I have very little tools at my disposal, like we're talking a handsaw, a hand sander, and a drill. Hence, while I confess my method of hollowing out my phone case was very far from efficient, it's not like I had a better option given the tools available to me. So yeah, this part took actually ages, but not because, only because you have to drill a bazillion holes, making sure each one doesn't go too far down, but also goes far enough down. But also because you have to position them such that there's like as little wood as possible between each hole, which normally wouldn't be too hard, but my situation was different. See, I ordered these drill bits off Amazon explicitly for this purpose, but what I didn't realize is these drill bits sucked. Literally, they didn't drill anything. How they functionally worked is once I pressed them hard enough into the wood for long enough, spinning at maximum drill speed, the friction would heat them up such that they would burn through the wood. Yep, I hollowed out my phone case by burning through it using fast spinning pieces of metal. That is much more accurate than saying I drilled holes. Thus, as you can imagine, each hole was much more difficult to drill. Plus, I ended up drilling each hole twice, the first time with a pointed drill bit, and the second time with a bit that was basically a cylinder, so that the hole would go all the way down to the bottom more effectively. So yeah, it took me absolutely ages, but eventually I drilled every hole. Once I got there, Jediah, a friend of my dad, saw me working in this horribly inefficient manner and decided he would take pity on me and offered me the use of some of his tools, which I was like, "You are an angel sent from God himself." However, unfortunately, most of the tools he had that would have been super useful were in storage. So the only ones he could actually access, and which I actually ended up using, were a chisel and 2 clamps. And while that meant that the creation process remained terribly inefficient, at least I could now drill straight edges because chisel. Or I can now make straight edges because chisel. So yeah, definitely helpful. Hence, after I finished drilling all the holes, I took my chisel around the edge to make it look good, and I may have cracked the wood in half a few times. But it turns out that's nothing a little super glue can't fix. So here you go. Stage 2. How did I get rid of the wood in between the drilled holes, you ask? Answer, pliers. I took pliers and ripped all the wood that was left out. Again, immensely inefficient. So yeah, I managed to get all the way around and end up with a mostly hollow piece of wood. After I drilled from the top and the bottom, because my drill bit wasn't long enough to go all the way to the top, all the way down if I didn't do that, and very painstakingly carved out a little lip that holds the phone case on both sides. I must say, this was probably the hardest part because the weird bit I was using did not want to go straight down and kept slipping sideways. Because, there was a lack of wood to one side and it makes carving out the lip super tedious. But I did manage to get it done, and here's where it left me. Boop. Unfortunately, in the process, I kind of broke through what was going to be the top part of the phone case, and I tried to repair it, but it didn't work. Thus, I ended up just, having wood cover the bottom, which I admit is not the most aesthetically pleasing, but I had no choice. So yeah. Anyway, once I reached this stage, I was super happy because up until now, things could go seriously wrong and wreck the whole project. Like, if one of those times I was drilling down, just punch to the back, or I was drilling the lip out, punch to the side, that was it. But at this point, all that was left was rigorous sanding. However, my excitement was a bit premature as I didn't realize, first, how sanding with a 40 grit paper would take ages to grind down the wood, and second, how stupid hard it is to fine-tune a block of wood to fit your phone perfectly, so as not be too loose or too tight. Actually so hard. I mean, I did have a sanding tool at least, so I didn't have to hand sand it, but still, the tool was very awkward to try and get in the wood indent to sand down the inside of the phone case. Also, my arm got so sore, because I think I worked on that for 5 hours straight. Man, my shoulder hurt the next morning. Anyway, after a lot of sanding and drilling out the holes from the camera and biometrics, this is where I was at. Picture. Finally, starting to look like a phone case, right? I then did some more sanding and fine tuning and got it so the phone fit in the case the whole way and snugly. I rounded out the edges and all that, and here's where I was after that. At this point, I was maximally happy because I had done all the hard work and actually made a case, so all I need to do now is make it aesthetically appealing. So next I stained it, and here's how it was looking. And honestly, I think it looked pretty cool. And I thought all I left to do was make some leather to make sure, it didn't dent when it fell. But it was at this point I realized a terrible thing. I had forgotten a hole for the flashlight and had no way of making sure it stayed in the case if it was dropped upside down. Hence, I drilled the appropriate holes, but as you might suspect, they weren't stained, so I was like, well, guess I better stain these. However, in applying the second stain, I accidentally got some stain on the already stained part, which as you may suppose made it darker, so I was like, well, guess there's nothing to be done but put a second coat on the whole thing, so I did that. However, what I failed to take into account is that the stain I had gotten wasn't just stain, it was a stained polyurethane blend, which meant that the stain was mixed with finish. So when I put on an extra level of stain, it wasn't really staining the wood, it was just staining the finish. And as you might expect, that looked really bad, maximally ugly. So I sanded down all the flat parts until I got rid of all the extra stain and then restained those parts, and I got this. Which, honestly, I think probably looked better than the original because it had like all the dark stain in the grooves, which honestly looks pretty cool. So yeah, finally after that, I super glued on some leather because super glue is a magical substance. And here's a picture of the final product. Personally, I think it turned out pretty darn well. True, it's a bit bulky case, and I would have liked to insert leather in the actual wood, but that would have been so much work. So yeah, here's the end product. And we'll admit it was a lot better than my last one. Plus, the case was seriously falling apart. Here's a picture of my old case before I switched. Oh yeah, I was dead. You served me well, phone case. You served me well. So there you go, the story of how I created my phone case using mostly a drill and an inordinate amount of time and effort. Moving on, the following morning I worked on the phone case. Finally finished the last live email recording because there was a section of that was lost due to Neo calling in the middle of it. I then talked with Neo and Joe in the basement, watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and then after we disbanded and I was taking Joe home, I felt like I was super foggy. Oh, it was super foggy, and Colorado's hardly ever foggy like that. So I persuaded him to go on a drive with me, and we just talked, and it was good. And then once we got back, it was only 11 or something at night. So Joe and I finally finished My Hero Academia. Seriously, that anime is so long, 110 episodes or something like that. Joe and I decided to watch the new ones together, but we hadn't got around to it for actual months, so it was good to actually finish that. The following morning, I worked on my phone case, got the aforementioned tools from Jaya, played some Minecraft, hung out with Braden and John at their house for a while, and I also finished taking antibiotics for the tooth abscess, which is a big yay, because antibiotics suck. The following day, I productively worked on my life history thing a bit. I then played a bit of Minecraft, watched a bit of anime before joining Joe, Caleb, and Ben over at Joe's house to watch American Sniper, which wasn't bad. And then, of course, Joe and I stayed up till 3 doing anime guessing games. Somehow, I'm still not tired of them. I then worked on my phone case the next day for a few hours, read some of the myriad of books I need to read, watched your lineup with the fam, and that was what I was playing, because I've already seen it. I was drawing one of my characters on Ben's tablet. See, art is evil, because it looks deceptively easy, but it's surprisingly hard. And me, being me, I don't like not being able to do things. Thus, I see art as an affront to my humanity. Also, I'd really like to just be able to instantiate the fantasy scenes in my mind in reality. So, is that too. Plus, I'm putting a very small effort into learning art. And so far, I'm doing quite poorly. After Your Lie, I then watched a bit more anime and rounded the night by playing on my Quest, because Facebook put out this new thing called Horizons, and it's basically just, normal people make some games. And one of those games is actually really fun, so I got a bit addicted for a while there. The following day, I read some more, went over to Joe's house, and worked on an AMV with him together. I then worked on my life story some more before rounding out the night with some old Flash games, because I figured, how to run them on my old computer, even though Flash is dead. The next day, I went promptly back to Joe's house, where due to a disagreement on how the anime we're working on should be crafted, we decided to have a competition. I make an AMV, and Joe makes an AMV, and we'll see who wins in the polls. Unfortunately, results have come in, and Joe is indeed the winner, taking 5 of the votes, and me taking only 3. So that's a maximal sad. So yeah, as a result of said competition, we redid some of the AMV we'd done earlier, and by we, I do mean we, because, oh no, I don't know how to do the editing software, and thus Joe actually did all the things, and thus I was like, move the thing, and the other thing! So I didn't actually, it wasn't a we. So yeah, we worked on that until Rasher Christie came around, and then I talked with this new guy, Ethan, who had some stupid ideas, and thus I told him as much. After that, Alan gave me a critique of my conduct with Jason, the legendary Thomas I ended up leaving, basically because I wasn't respectful enough, which I might say was a very big oof. I really enjoyed and found helpful our conversations. So when he was like, yeah, I'm done, after 30 hours of conversation, it was genuinely very saddening. I had never dated before. Correction, I've never intentionally dated before, but I've got to think that this is at least similar to what a breakup feels like. It was actually so sad. But thankfully, my profuse apologizing may have made it so Jason will talk to me again. So yay! Anyway, Alan was super helpful, and as one might surmise, his axiomizing certain implicit social laws that I had missed will definitely help me in the future. Once I was over, Joe and I went back to his house and hung out until late at night. We devised this brilliant combination of anime guessing and chess, where if you got an anime intro guess right, you got to move. And if you got it wrong, your opponent got to move. And honestly, it made both chess and anime guessing quite a bit more fun. The other thing that we did that night was took turns playing VR and working on like life history stuff while the Oculus was, going until it died. So that was also fun. The day after, I read some more, played some more VR, got my root canal situation done as they replaced the temporary filling, and then I planned some stuff with Morgan for our trip to Idaho. See, originally I was going to go during the time I had the tooth abscess, but as you might surmise, my discussion of the pain I experienced, tooth abscesses suck, and therefore the trip was rescheduled to 2 weeks later. As for why the trip, well, long and short of it is I made some online friends of mine back on Story Neighbors days, and they've come into a pretty rough situation and made some bad decisions. And so it seemed like a good time, because for once in my life, I had no commitments that would keep me from a spontaneous trip to Idaho. So yeah, hence the trip to Idaho. Anyway, the next day, I finished the book I was reading through, Philosophical Reasoning, which honestly wasn't that informative. And then I started a book Michael had recommended me called Hidden in Plain View about undesigned coincidences in the Gospels. And so far, it's been pretty good. Definitely bumps the Gospel credibility as historical accounts. The rest of the day, I spent playing VR, not being super productive, and kind of sort of hanging with Joe. As the sun began its next revolution around the Earth, because we are geocentrists in this house, I worked on my phone case some more before working on my life history some. Read stuff in my book, then played VR after the sun completed its course. The next morning was Saturday morning, which for most of humanity is the one morning of relaxation. But for me, it's the one morning of liquid sunshine death. See, the sun, in small doses, is not toxic to the human soul. But should one get in the position to ingest the sun at full potency, as it rises from its slumber, then I assure you, your soul will suffer severely from ingesting the liquid sunshine death. And so my soul did that Saturday morning, and will for many mornings to come, because it happens to be the case that Matt has organized a book study on a book that goes to the basics of Thomistic metaphysics with me and Alan. Yet the only time he has available to call happens to be at 8 in the morning. So, that's just great. And when you regularly stay up till 3 in the morning, I assure you, waking up at 8 is indeed liquid sunshine death. So yeah, I woke up and talked with Matt and Alan for 4 hours. First about the book, and then about some Catholicism, until Matt was like, yeah, I really have to go. And Alan was like, sweet. Oh, and I were like, sweet. And then, of course, I worked on my phone case. At this point, it was starting to take shapes. That's nice. I then stickered what was going to be my computer case, but has henceforth turned into my sticker holding bag, because Ben was right. Stickers and fabric do not really mesh, so you have to glue them on. But here's a picture of that, because I think this bag is pretty darn sweet looking. At this point in time, I'm going to just try and find a computer case at a thrift store, because when I was in Idaho, I visited a thrift store and there were actually so many cool computer cases, and I was like, what am I doing, paying full price on Amazon? Anyway, I did that, then hopped on the Ratchet Christie Minecraft chat until about 11 at night before working some more on my phone case and then watching an episode of anime. The day thereafter, I showed up to Southgate because, upon waking, I gazed at my phone and found a message from Grace saying Naomi wanted to talk philosophy with me. And of course, not to refuse a philosophy summons, I promptly got out of bed and drove to Southgate. Now, concerning the event, there is something special that occurred, because the aforementioned Naomi apparently found it vexing that I identified her dictator ice cream story for what it clearly was, boring, and thus instigated a campaign to instantiate the voices of others in this life of email so they can write how they think the events actually went down, as if my recounting were not the gospel truth of the matter. So first, I'll say what actually happened, then I'll include the various interpretations of what happened. Cool? Just kidding. I don't care if you approve. So I show up at Southgate, and there, just as the service ends, I promptly find Naomi, where she brings up the various theological views about God's predestination action, the names of which I read long ago, but I had forgotten, largely because I've followed the debate in a more philosophical direction. As a result, the theological views are at least in part wrong-headed. However, the conversation quickly moved on from God's relation of time, which is a subject, God's relation to time, which is a subject I know quite about. And because I think that's where the meat of the predestination free will conversation lies, we will talk about that for a while. I explained things in a pretty efficient and I think decently understandable way, and then that conversation ended, and we got lunch. At lunch, nothing interesting happened. Joe got a can of Bob Ross Abomination, and obviously I refused to drink it, and then I went home. And that's how things went. Now for some other perspectives, per Naomi's request bestowed upon you in a random order. Joe's got the first place, so here we go. After the service, I glanced out at the sanctuary and to my surprise saw Alex. Recently, this has become a rare sight for annoying reasons. I figured most people would congregate around him, as he usually has some kind of interesting topic to talk about, so I walked over and I was correct. A small crowd formed. We most listened to talk about stuff he wanted to talk about with him. No, I've talked about with him before. But it was at least nice to understand everything. Mostly I just waited for him and Naomi, who, by the way, was the reason he was here, to come to a conclusion. I relayed that I had come to terms with counterfactuals, and he was happy. He responded with, "Do you want to know what I haven't been telling you about them?" And of course I responded the affirmative. He told me which was nice of him, because I can now accept counterfactuals without accepting possible worlds. Yay. Immediately after, he told me he was less than pleased with his action, which made me somewhat happier, but mostly confused. See, I don't understand why withholding information you believe to be true, because it just means that the person you're talking to will come to different conclusions than you. Anyway, later that lunch, I was given a can of Bob Ross, positive energy drink. It was very blue and tasted like an autopop. But Alex was lame and wouldn't try any. I don't think we talked about very many interesting things during lunch, but I still had a good time. Here is Johanna's perspectives. I stood on the edge of the circle of 12 or so people and listened in on various conversations that were happening. Naomi Stanky was talking to Karina. I want to write a story where the characters, about these characters in the Renaissance time period, she said, mentioning to Joe and Alex, who were deep in a lively conversation about God and time, or something along those lines. We giggled, imagining Alex wearing an elaborate outfit with an enormous feather plume attached to a large hat. The discussion on God and time had been happening for several minutes. Originally, Naomi had brought it up, which eventually led to a deep discussion on the matter. Alex was presenting the various ways to explain it, and the problems with each argument. As they talked, note, I hardly understood what they were saying. Alex admitted the fact that he couldn't explain it in any way yet, so my conclusion was, so you can't explain God. This seemed to greatly aggravate Alex, and he responded with, but you can't just conclude that. I did anyway. I figured, we're going to have to settle at some point in time with most things, so I'll just do it now. Lunchtime finally came, and after we had our food, we were sitting at a table. Naomi had told a very interesting story about Leonardo da Vinci, and it was fun hearing it again, even though I'd already heard it once before. Joe had been given a Bob Ross positive energy drink, which he opened, and was excited to discover was bright blue. I personally was kind of disgusted after reading the ingredients list, and seeing the unnatural color they drink. Several people poured small amounts into their cups to try it, and various reactions were humorous to observe. I spent the rest of the time at church hanging out with the group and playing a game with some other kids. It was enjoyable. I think that's all that needs to be said on the matter of Sunday afternoon. And finally, Naomi's perspective. I shall start the way all good narratives shall start. There were croissants, and there were cream puffs. It was glorious. All other details shall be entertaining and probably considered trivial, but those two you must know. You're welcome. It was supposed to be a usual Sunday afternoon lunch bunch, but when Grace got to church, I mentioned I had actually learned a fact about philosophy and kept hoping I'd run into Alex so we could discuss it, and I could ditch my attempts to remember it. Grace replied with, well, I can text him. Actually, I don't think I have his number. Oh, I found it. My first thought was, how do you not know if you have your brother's number? And my second thought was, cool, I'll actually have a decent conversation with Alex and he'll be satisfied. My third thought, albeit dramatic, was, oh no, I have summoned the beast. The beast arrived after the service and immediately charged towards me and demanded satisfactory discussion, which I think went fairly well, because I brought up superlapsarianism and infralapsarianism, and I had to remind Alex which those were, which made me feel pretty good about myself. Haha. But then I just had to bring up how they assume God is bound in time, which naturally started a discussion about the relationship between God and time, and then I was way out of my depth. It was hilariously hard to try and think as fast as Alex could talk, but I kept up, sort of. It remains to be seen if Alex will deem the drive to converse with me as worth it, though. Also worth mentioning, Karina was wearing those epic knee-high boots that looked like she stepped out of Sherwood Forest. She got them from her brother-in-law, ex-housemate's ex-girlfriend, for free. Emphasis on free. I'm a huge fan of free stuff, so that was exciting. Lol. Anyway, I had lots of good conversations and big hugs from wonderful people, and I'm literally counting down the days, 89 at the time I'm writing this, until I can move back to town and be around these cool people all the time. If anyone dares to claim that my story about Da Vinci's edible banquet table was boring, I hereby challenge them to a duel. There you go. Now you've tasted others' inferior perspectives, so I'm confident... Oh, no, that's me. There you go. Now you've tasted others' inferior perspectives, so I'm confident you'll find mine preferable. However, on a mostly unrelated note, Naomi's mentioned challenging people to duel, and that just reminded me of the old writing duels I used to do at Story Embers, which you'll understand why this memory is fresh later on. And thus I will, mostly for my own nostalgic pleasure, but also for your reading pleasure, include one of those old fights. Hey, I promise I'll do better next time. Kari's words were edged in anger. I closed my eyes and redirected the torrent flowing from her lips through my subconscious. I pictured her as she once was, a young lass with fiery hair and heart to match. A smile cracked upon my crusty lips. I always had liked her. The trouble was power. It could do a number on anyone, but Kari? I shook my head. Kari and power were like open flame and black powder. Perfect and dangerous. My eyes snapped open and my gaze stole her breath. You're getting reckless. My words were but a whisper. It's time for you to step down. Kara stared. Her mouth moved, but no sound escaped her lips. Finally, her eyes sparked, and she found her voice. If you wanted to vote me, you're going to have to fight me. My jaw clenched involuntarily. Kari raised her chin. And just a warning, I'll win. I exhaled slowly and glanced at the mug of ale in my hand. It was time for a controlled burn. I exploded into motion and flung the cup of ale toward her. A dagger materialized from the folds of her cloak, and she slashed the mug away. Kari smiled, and I raised the brow of my fiery eye. My left hand held the tip of my blade to her stomach. Her features contorted in disgust as she took a step back and drew her dual blades. I got it from the bar and flipped open my weapon. "Drop your sword," I commanded, each word dripped with authority. And here was Kari's response post. I leaped towards Inconceivable, eyes flashing, swords firmly in my grip. No way was I going to surrender to him, or anyone. He jumped backwards, avoiding my blades, then swung at me with his blades. I blocked, my eyes boring into his, trying to disconcert him. Inconceivable simply grinned and pressed harder. I suddenly crouched down and rolled to the side, coming up to my feet. I spun around only to find myself staring at the tip of an arrow, mere inches from my face. The Inconceivable's face was hard. Surrender now. I simply glared. Suddenly, I leapt up and over him. Picking up a chair, I tossed it in Inconceivable's general direction. Then I took advantage of this distraction to transform my swords in their double-bladed state. When we were facing each other again, Inconceivable's weapon was also in his double-bladed form. We both charged at the same time, clashing nearly instantly. I brought my knee into his stomach, and he doubled over in pain. I maneuvered behind Inconceivable, trying to chop the nerve on the back of his neck that would knock him out. Inconceivable whirled around and lashed out, his blade bouncing off my gauntlet on my left arm. It was enough. I stumbled backward, giving him time to recover. Inconceivable rushed at me again, his eyes narrowed, and my hand shot out, a palm forward. A small, glowing golden sphere shot out and into the Inconceivable's head. He staggered slightly, then fell to his knees, barely conscious. I walked forward and finally hit the nerve. He slumped over, senseless. I cast Inconceivable one last glance, then returned my swords to their normal sheathed form, wincing. My left arm was definitely going to be bruised. Oh well. I strolled out of the tavern, leaving Inconceivable one behind. Okay, first of all, Kari actually lost that fight by 3-2 vote in my favor. Second, her reasons for rebelling against my rebellion sucked, I just gotta say. Nevertheless, I do miss that. Those were the good old days. Anyway, after the Southgate encounter, which I'm sure you felt sufficiently informed about after 4 recountings of it, I worked on my phone case, went over to Neon City's house, played Halo with everyone, and then finished a good slice of life anime. The next morning I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking about everything I needed to do to bring to do my trip to Idaho the next day. Which was stupid and counterproductive because in doing so, I obviously made life harder due to sleep deprivation. Anyway, after getting like 4 hours of sleep, I then worked on my phone case some more, went shopping, and tried to buy everything I would need, and then went to Joe's house where we had a squad meetup minus Caleb, and I just sat there with my eyes closed for like 3 hours and talked. The conversation was an important one, but not one I love discussing. Plus, I don't think anything new was said since Joe and I had already have it. So yeah, not my favorite time, but not trash. Plus, we did talk about some other things, like Noah's trash response to the paradox of induction. Stupid 100% belief. And yeah, overall, decent time. I then left Joe's house and headed back home where I met with Morgan, and we began the trek into the night. See, because of my whacked out sleep schedule, I wasn't like getting tired until like 3 normally. So Morgan and I had talked about it, and we decided that it would be wise, given that fact, to leave in the night instead of in the morning, like normal people do, because that way I could drive until like 3 or so, and then I'd wake up Morgan, who would have gotten some sleep at that point in time, and we'd switch off. Not a bad plan, right? Well, the trouble was with said plan that I hardly got any sleep the night before, and even though Morgan tried to do some sleep starting around midnight, we left at 11, she hardly got any. So, yeah, it didn't work out nearly as well as we'd planned, but I did make it till 3:30, because it turns out men can live on energy drinks alone. Morgan then drove until like 5 in the morning or something. I got like 2 hours of sleep, and then I took over, and we made it to Bozeman. Once we got there, we decided that given both of our sleep-deprived states, it would be best to sleep for a few hours in the Walmart parking lot, so here's a picture of that. Unfortunately, I slept worse then because as a kid, my family drove across the country quite a few times unless I got used to falling asleep in a moving car. And at this point, I actually fall asleep pretty easily given the car's moving. But car seats are not super comfortable. And so, yeah, being in a stationary car was not great sleep for me. However, thankfully, Morgan slept pretty well. And so when she got 3 hours or so, she was able to keep going while I was able to rest. So we bought some Walmart Caesar salads, which I might say, a good salad at the right time can be way more refreshing than like most anything else, and thus enjoyable. Don't underestimate the power of salad. And thus we hit the road again. And it wasn't till I think around 4 that we made it to Coeur d'Alene. And it was during that drive that Morgan and I talked about a host of stuff. I definitely got to know Morgan quite a bit better at that time, and it was good because that was one of my goals. So if nothing else, the trip was a success. We arrived right as Abby, the mom friend of Esther and Sila's, was pulling out, so we just missed her, which left just Esther at the house. And of course, I'd only met Esther in person once before, and longtime readers will know that was how that went. Shivers the memory. Thus, I was definitely a bit nervous for the reunion, but Esther and I had promised beforehand to make sure that it wasn't 10,000% awkward this time. So I strode forth in my extroverted, assertive self. However, I've got to say, Esther did not hold up her end of the bargain because she was not extroverted, and there were definitely periods of awkward silence that I had to fill. So yeah, an awkward start, but I mean, to be fair, knowing someone online is a whole different experience than knowing in person. And Esther actually asked, do you guys have like a volume? Asked, do you have a volume button? Because she didn't realize how loud of a person I am. And also Morgan vexingly agreed that a volume control would be a nice addition to my person. So really feeling the love there. Anyway, after me trying to bridge the awkwardness gap, it came up that at Abby's place, which was the original plan where Morgan and I would sleep, and thus the meeting was first there was only one bed, which Celia was staying in. She was in California at the time, but would return midway through the trip. Thus, if we were to settle in that room, we would have to forfeit it to Celia when she came back in 2 days. Thus, realizing the impracticality of such a situation, I asked if we could stay at Esther Celia's place instead, as Celia was staying at Abby's, which meant that there was a free bed. So we, end up doing that. So yeah, we decided we would just follow Esther back to her place. A reasonable course of action, or so I thought. But yeah, it turns out Esther is the worst at having people follow her. Like, actually, she ran her, right at the start, she ran a yellow light, which of course meant Morgan and I had to be stuck at the said light while she scrambled to try and make sure we didn't lose her. And then she ran a red light. Like, who runs a red light when people are following them? So yeah, absolutely trash escort. Though, to be fair, she got significantly better later on. So yeah, I chewed her out for that, and everything got a little bit less awkward. We set up in Esther's house, which is a basement she's renting from one of her coworkers. It was also surprisingly nice. I totally expected some, ghetto place. And then headed back to Abby's. Now, Abby is like the reincarnated version of me. Oh, she's like a me reincarnated as a slightly traumatized mom. She talks fast, is intelligent, though not educated on topics I am, and efficient. And now I will confess that my efficiency rating has gone down. I've mellowed out a bit. But she's like as efficient with her time as I was back in the day. So yeah, I instantly liked Abby, which Esther totally called ahead of time. And we talked about various topics, and we kind of hit it off. However, it was around this time that her kids were at home, and those things became the bane of my existence. See, small children are bad enough because they do strange irrational things for strange irrational reasons, and thus I don't understand them, if there's anything to be understood in the first place. But these children also had a strong affinity for throwing things, and that affinity increased the more you reacted. Thus, I pulled a, whatever those tall hatted never moving guards are called, and endured a barrage of hard and squishy items. Also grapes. Grapes are evil incarnate in the hands of children. Now whenever I see a grape, a little part of me trembles in terror. But aside from the small children, which weren't all bad, don't get me wrong, we came to reach an understanding of sorts, and it also helped mitigate the small child tax, when I definitely appreciate that, because I got to like them a little bit more, as things got better. Morgan and I kind of just hung out and engaged in pseudo small talk. I say pseudo because it was brief conversations about non-small talky topics. Okay, hold up, I just remembered something. I have to write it in now because I'll forget it. When Esther and I picked up Celia from the airport, the literal first question she asked me was, how's the weather in Colorado? Like, seriously, you start a conversation with me by using the small talk paradigm case of talking about the weather? Gosh, Celia, I'm still 99% disappointed. Anyway, having got that enraging tangent out of the way, after Abby got her kids in bed, we talked a bit. Oh, and Morgan and I called in that early because we were both super tired. Thus, we drove back to Esther's house and crashed. Morgan in Celia's bed and me on the couch they had made for me in the living room. See, the trouble with said couch, however, is that it was too short by like half a foot, which required me to engage in the squish. But the problem was also the cushions on the back couldn't be removed, so the couch was also pretty narrow, which meant that as I did the squish, my arms and knees hung off the couch, which of course made for quite the uncomfortable sleeping experience. Hence, I did even more poor sleeping, only to be awakened by some old lady coming down the stairs to let her dogs out in the morning. But see, being my crafty self, I did one of those like half squint eye opens, where it looks like your eyes are closed, but you actually can see a tiny bit. And that, though I couldn't see her expression because of the aforementioned eye posture, she did like one of those stop and stare moments when she realized, when she got to the bottom of the stairs and she saw me. I bet she was quite confused at seeing a random guy sleeping on the couch in her basement. So yeah, an interesting way to wake up. Now, later that day, I was informed of two things. First, that the couch I was sleeping on actually turned into a bed, which would have been great to know earlier. And second, that said old lady, partially because she didn't like me sleeping on her couch, and partially because she was nice, offered me the guest room. So, for nights thereafter, I got to sleep on an actual bed, which I've got to say, after 3 days of compound poor sleep, I was so happy to get a bed. I have come to the conclusion that if dogs, by some miracle, go to heaven, then there better be beds in heaven. Just saying. The following day, the awkwardness level eased up with Esther, though it wasn't quite non-existent, and Morgan, me, and her drove to the Phoenix town to get coffee, which I sponsored. We then walked around Coeur d'Alene a bit, and it was mostly boring. However, after that, Morgan put in a request for alone time, which the brass approved, and thus Esther and I dropped her off and went for a scenic drive, grabbing some Qdoba. Now, Esther insisted on driving the Phoenix, which, though the Phoenix is my mount, I allowed because I know driving can be fun. And let's be honest, those privileged with driving such a marvelous car will be changed forever by the experience. Though I admit, Esther's driving did make me a bit nervous. So we got driving, and that's when I would say the awkwardness level reached about 0. It was just Esther and I talking like we always have. So that was actually great. First and foremost, the drive was quite scenic. And second, I got to unpack some basic methodologies available to the philosopher that had been systematically presented to me in the aforementioned philosophical reasoning book. And I think Esther generally enjoyed the conversation, or at least pretended really well. We talked for quite a few hours, and it was a good time to reconnect. Once we got back, the three of us decided to paint, because that's kind of Esther's thing, and she did what I want to do, talk about philosophy for hours, so I figured it would be only fair to return the favor. So here's a picture of Esther, by the way. So yeah, we worked on our art for a few hours before heading over to Abby's, where we thought we would talk about the whole church experience that led them to what I will deem the gaggle of trauma girls. But it turned out that such a talk didn't really happen, as it took a while for the kids to get to sleep. Definitely because we were there. And I'm not sure if this was then or later, but I made this fancy Lego spaceship. There was only a little bit of Lego that they had, and they were like and me making the spaceship made me like instantly popular with the two boys. Hence, they ended up really liking me, which in some ways was better, but in most ways was definitely worse, because that meant for the littler one who wanted to throw things at me, he wanted to just attack me even more. However, the older one actually liked a lot more, and I won his respect with Lego, so he listened to me more, which was more fun to be around. Anyway, after the kids were all put to bed, I went over to Cass's house, the last member of the gaggle of trauma girls, and I then gave the best, most concise, and cogent summary of Thomistic metaphysics ever, not to pat myself on the back or anything. And it only took like 2 hours. I was genuinely so proud of myself. The result of the conversation was that Cass was amused and wanted me to talk to their circle's token intellectual, and Abby seemed genuinely interested, and Esther 100% zoned out. So overall, I think a success, but not an overwhelming one. Plus, it turns out that Morgan was paying attention, so that was a boon. Then, of course, when we got back, I got my first good night's sleep in my heaven-bound bed. The following morning, we spent finishing up our painting, of which here's a picture of all of them. Wow, mine is so much worse by comparison. I can tell you which one is mine, but unfortunately, I think it's painfully obvious. Oh, and also to be clear, that's my fancy sword on a table. Not a door, not a wall, not over lava, on a table. Anyway, other than that, the fox is Morgan's, and as you might surmise from the person who literally gets, paid to paint, the weird double-headed horse is Esther's. Now, to be fair, she did have, 3 times the time to work on it, so who knows? Maybe if we had that time, we could have made something that cool. Not saying I would have succeeded, but hey, it's possible. After that painting, time came, meaning Morgan, Esther, and I. Oh, after that painting time, we, meaning Morgan, Esther, and I, went grocery shopping, and then Esther and I took Sela's car and went to pick up Sela, dropping off Morgan at the house for some alone time because she didn't spend enough time in her coral reef. Then she either dries out or the fish all die, which is both sad. So yeah, did that, and me and Esther had a really good conversation on the way to pick Sela up. Honestly, the best of the whole week. We were just being really blunt and straightforward, which is my jam, and it was really good. Also, apparently Esther has a thing for shoulders. So if you want to be attracted to females, apparently get Joe-like shoulders. Or if you want to be unattractive, then get wimpy shoulders. Scribble some things down on his life goals list. So yeah, good conversation, pick up Sela. Worst intro question ever, and the rest of the car was mostly just Esther and Sela sistering out about stuff. But it was all good. We then went back to Abby's, because that was where Sela was staying, and I played with the kids for a few hours. We jumped on the trampoline, and I bounced them, and they loved that. And it was probably during that time that I got infected, because one of the kids, the 7-year-old that loved attacking me and throwing things at me, was sick, and he climbed all over me for the extension of that time. We then waited around for ages as Abby tried to get her kids to bed once more, after which I talked with Sela and Chris, Abby's husband, about not really important stuff. Though I now know how the military works, and I would like to say, it's stupid the Air Force doesn't just fight in the air, and the Marines don't just fight in the water. Why would you literally call something Air Force if they really just are an everything force with a bit of emphasis on air? That's stupid. Also, there were numerous times when Morgan totally was meteor mode and trying to stop him by a abrasive approach. The army conversation with Sela was one such case. Anyway, Sela's made us hot chocolate, which was so-so. It wasn't very sweet, but I guess that was kind of the intention. She did a good job making it, how it was supposed to be, though. We then ended up not having the church talk because Cass found out her divorced husband was trying to argue in court and that she was crazy and that she was quite emotionally distraught and incapable of telling the tale. The next day, Esther had work, so Sela spent the day with Morgan and I. Here's a picture of her. It was a pretty good time. Just a lot of singing the songs we both like, including the Lego Batman song, which is an actual legend. If you haven't listened to it, you need to. But yeah, we drove the same way Esther and I drove the time before, but this time we went a lot further. We also decided to eat lunch at this one restaurant in this tiny town, if it can be called that. And it was good. We had a very Western, bar vibe, and Morgan and I played a game of pool. Which, of course, I won, because I'm awesome, and possibly because Ben and I played an abhorrent amount of pool when we were stuck in the Kansas house, literally had nothing else to do. So yeah, that was good. We then walked out to the docks before going back, and with a brief detour to visit the Coeur d'Alene Beverly Hills equivalent. And yeah, not really any deep conversations, but still a good time. On the way back, we stopped by the grocery store and picked up some food and movie snacks because we wanted to watch an anime once we got back. We picked up Esther, and upon getting back, decided it would be a good time to read through some old SE posts from when we met, and that was actually the best. Here's a picture of Sela and Esther around there. Honestly, I don't think I've laughed that hard in years. Definitely the highlight of the whole trip. Here's some excerpts of what I wrote back in the day. He slams down his mug and frothy liquid sloshes on the bar. He turns to look at you. A scar rakes down his cheek and through his eye, but now a cavern of rot and mold. Hear ye now my tale of woe. He takes another draw from the mug. I came to this land, to this Embaria, long ago. I was young then, a fool with me hopes and dreams. I wanted to join the cavalry, a knight in charming armor I was to be. 'Tis I was sure of it. They halted me at the gate, they did. Told me I had to take a test. Had to be good enough to join their ranks. I laughed then. I was the best swordsman of all me countrymen, I was. A test 'twas only a formality. So I strode into the arena. I would spar to be the best and be victorious. I could see it then. I never had a chance. They stripped me of my armor, took away my sword, and gave me an apprentice's blade, they did. So light was that rusting piece of iron I could have dropped it and a feather would have fallen faster. Then they attacked me, they did. 3 against 1 it was. Stared venomously into his mug. And then it came time for the branding. A hot iron marred my skin. They cast me out. Told me to come back when I'd become a man. Strokes the word novice on his scarred flesh. I'll show them. His one eye bores into your soul. Join me, and together we can crush their tyrannical reign. Stands up on a soapbox. My fellow Imbrarians, hear me now. 20 seconds ago, I had a dream. I dreamt of being free of the tyrannical reign of prejudice that the label novice has brought upon me. Upon you, my fellow citizens. So don't let my dreams be dreams. I raised a battle cry. I readied the cannons and laid siege to the birthplace of this cruel label. Tirelessly, valiantly I fought, even when the sun could stand no more. Yet the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that the word was still there. Oh, injustice upon injustice, tyranny of tyrannies. I wept for the end of innocence and my legs felt of lead. 'Tis a sin to kill a mockingbird, and so was I, helpless beneath the word's iron fist. And so, as I lay within death's very grasp, a masked man found me and pulled me from the depths of the grave. He nursed me back to health and inscribed these words upon the first. Rage, rage against the dying of the fight. So I stand before you now, summoning you to take up arms and rally with me against injustice. Don't let the fight within you die. Just do it! Something crashes through the tavern ceiling. Conversations die and all eyes turn to the crater. A being rises from the wreckage. It spreads its wings, black as midnight, and eyes like fire bore into mine. I flick up with my blade, grab an arrow, and knock it. The being's eyes, a sickly grin. The rider's scores range like this. I gaze at the being, ready to loose. Who ye be? What ye be wanting with me? You won't be getting. The creature raises itself to full height. Its raven hair skimming the ceiling. Beginner, 14 through 22. My eyes go wide. What are you doing? Its skin begins to glow and shimmer. Novice, 23 through 35. I loose my arrow and watch in horror as it bounces off the being's skin. Where once was flesh, now steel grows white hot. She turns a sickly grin as the transformation climbs up her body. Intermediate, 36 through 48. In a fluid, almost panic motion, I draw another arrow and draw back as far as my sword bow will allow. You'll never stop the revolution! My cry rises in the air. My arrow flies into her eye. The arrow shatters. Advanced, 49 through 59. The transformation is complete. An invincible, glistening steel being towers before me. Expert, 60 through 67. Her voice chills my spine as the words heard long ago ring like church bells with my skull. Facts, my friends, are immortal. Master, 68 through 70. I lunge forward. My blade merely sparks as it clashes with her skin. She explodes forward and embeds her blade in my chest. I feel the steel pierce my frantic heart. The world begins to gray, and her words sound distant, a whisper. So actually, there's not much difference between the two. She twists, and all goes dark. Light blazes into my lone eye. I gasp, and my hands rush to my chest. The blade is gone. Nothing even hurts. I blink and raise my hand as I try to peer into the glorious light shining before me. The inconceivable one! Suddenly, the light fades and I see an angel shaking his head. Couldn't your parents have named you a simpler name? I blinked twice. What? I mean, the inconceivable one doesn't really roll off the tongue. I look behind me. Are ye talking to me? The angel crosses his bursting arms. Of course I'm talking to you. Do you see anyone else here? I scan the barren, fluffy cloud landscape. No. Suddenly, he's right behind me, putting his arm around my shoulder. Look, despite the fact your name is the worst, the big guy has a message for you. He says, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. You are all one in Christ. So, he clapped his meaty hands together. You've got a revolution to start. I looked at him. What are thee babbling about? Where am... Oh! He let me go. I almost forgot. In a flash, he drew his sword and plunged it through my heart. I glared at him. I hate ye. He grinned. Not for long, you won't. Suddenly, the sword in my chest began to tingle. I looked down at his golden blade, and it read an inscription upon a silver hilt. I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And it is his life that I now live, the flesh I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Suddenly, that warmth exploded within me, and life surged through my veins. I felt joy fill my craggly old heart and my being. The angel yanked the blade free, and I stumbled back. I steadied myself and looked at my hands. They glowed. I looked back at the angel. Whatever you just did, I like it. I gasped. What happened to my voice? He shrugged. It's a package deal. Anyway, hope you like being a new creation. Have fun with the revolution. Wait, what do you mean? Suddenly, the clouds imploded upon themselves, and I found myself lying on the ground. I took a few quick breaths. I felt amazing. I sprained my feet and found my dual blade lying on the floor. The crowd gasped as a gaping hole... the crowd surrounded the gaping hole in the bar's roof. I snatched up my blade and laughed. The whole crowd gasped collectively. He's alive? How? His eye. It's glowing. I blinked and held up my hand to the hole of my eye. The light of a fire danced upon my hand. I shook my head. This just keeps getting better. I grinned. Time to start a revolution. My deep voice resonated throughout the tower. Once you knew me as the revolutionary, bent on destroying the test that had destroyed me. But now I am a new man. Dead is the man of the past, and in his place stands, well... I chuckled slightly. A slightly stranger, more glowing man! I am here to unite you, my fellow Imbrarians, to throw off the shackles of race and status this test has brought upon our land, to embrace the truth that we are all equals in the sight of our God, and to unite under his banner. Join me in the revolution of unity! I definitely peaked back then. If you want to read the thread, I actually copied it onto the docs, so, it's mostly just me debating for forever, but around Doc 3 is where things get more interesting, and honestly, reading through it is genuinely funny. So, if you care to explore, I bestow upon you the links. Alright, there you go. Doubt anyone will actually read through it all, but if you do, I'm sure you'll be entertained. Anyway, after reading and laughing for like a solid 2 hours, with Morgan just kind of amusingly observing, everyone decided we weren't really up for an anime, so we watched this really, really poorly made Tomb Raider movie. Actually, one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And then, after finishing that, we started an anime, which I had in mind, but we only made like 2 episodes because everyone got tired. But they did like it. So then Celia went back to Abby's place, and the rest of us all just crashed. The following day, I began to feel sick due to these small children from which I was at the jungle gym, and thus super tired. Morgan 100% came in clutch during this time, and basically bore all the social weight, which was a big help because I was super tired. We went around to their stores, but I was like 0% present during that time, which wasn't great. I did get to buy a pair of shoes, so that was a plus. After that, Esther and Morgan conspired to drug me with coffee to try and remedy my tired state, which brought me from exhausted to a pretty tired state. We then had to meet up with Wayne, the ex-pastor of the Reformed church Esther and Celia used to go to, and I got to have a really good debate with him for a couple of hours. He was heavily Reformed, so we were able to have an educated conversation, as I used to be Reformed, but I think that's wrong now, so yeah. It was a good talk. We then went over to Abby's and hung out with the kids, even though I mostly just lay on the couch like a dead person. We waited for Abby to get everyone to bed, and then once that finally rolled around, we went over to Cass's house and finally got to hear the church story. I won't recount it here because I don't know how much they would permit me to share, but it was definitely a complex and generally sucky situation. However, if I were to summarize the experience, I would say that it would be aptly summarized as a 3-hour drip feed of traumatized estrogen. That's about all that needs to be said. The following morning, which was at 4, because such was the day Morgan and I had to head back, so Morgan could work the next day. I felt sick, but not quite as bad as the day before. Morgan and I took turns doing the sleeping maneuver until the early hours, and I got pulled over in the morning for going 9 over the speed limit as I passed a cop. Apparently, their radar guns work behind them. How was I supposed to know that? But he only gave me a warning, so that was good. After that, we made it to Bozeman, where we met up with Morgan's aunt and uncle, and they gave us an awesome brunch. Really good. And yeah, I found them pretty enjoyable, so that was cool. Then we continued on and started talking about things, and one of those things happened to be apostolic succession. And thus it turned out that we got so engrossed in our apostolic succession conversation that we drove a full 2 hours in the wrong direction. That's right, we were so caught up that neither of us noticed the map telling us we were going the wrong way for 2 hours. And that's how you know you're in the presence of geniuses. So yeah, upon realizing a mistake, we both felt stupid and had to travel all the back roads of Montana to get home. Now see, this was an unfortunate state of affairs because, as you might surmise, the back roads of Montana are in fact quite barren and at times quite flat and straight. And since we were already 2 hours behind schedule, I may have taken the liberty to speed a few miles an hour over the speed limit, give or take 45. So yeah, I may have got up to 120 in a 75. See, at the time, I didn't know the harsh penalties were for speeding that bad. And if I did, I wouldn't have done it. But the combination of factors of being late, having no one be there on the roads, and as I explained to Morgan later, after intense introspection, I like fast. It became my course of action to speed at the aforementioned speeds. And further, unfortunately, the results of my actions were not limited to mere lessons learned, because I got caught. See, what happened is that in the process of speeding down one of those back roads, I approached an intersection with a stop sign, and another back road was going roughly perpendicular to it. There's a little hill on my right side, but otherwise, I could see the horizon all the way from my right to left. So, observing no cars were coming, I did not come to a full stop at the stop sign, not even close. I then continued my speeding regimen down the road, going 85 and 65, and as I was passing a guy, that speed stayed the same in a 55 zone. It was that was then that I saw the flashing lights. And gosh, that's gotta be one of the worst feelings ever, because as soon as I saw the red and blue, I knew I'd made a really bad mistake. So it turned out the cop was hiding behind that tiny little hill I mentioned earlier, and he not only saw me speed 30 miles above the speed limit, but he also saw me below a stop sign. So yeah, that whole experience super sucked. First ticket I've ever gotten, and as you might surmise, a really bad one. However, because the cop was really nice and didn't count me for he didn't count me for the 30 over because I was passing a truck, because he said the truck obscured my view of the sign, which was totally not true, but I'm so grateful he said that, because it turns out if you speed 25 miles over the speed limit, it counts as a major infraction, and that's at least 10 days of jail time. So, if he hadn't have been that kind, I literally would have gone to jail right now. Lovely thought. However, aside from the $170 ticket, which definitely bites, but not as bad as it should have been, like if it was here in Colorado, it would have been so much worse. According to Colorado law, if you have 9 points on your 12-month in a 12-month period, you get your license suspended. And as you might suspect, blowing through a stop sign is 3 points, and it just so happens speeding 20 miles an hour over the speed limit is another 6. So yeah, I was pretty crushed. It took me a few I'll See songs to get back to myself, and overall it was just a sucky experience. Morgan then drove for the next stretch, and we ended up switching off again and went back to our switching driving routine. But yeah, the last part of the drive was a bit of a downer, but we still had some good conversation. At the very tail end, we spent the last bit of the drive listening to Al City music, which was especially nice because I was really tired at that point in time. By the time we got home, it was 12:30, and we both basically just crashed without really giving party words because we were just so tired. I then got 6 or so hours of sleep because I was still sick. I wasn't really able to get more. And then I lethargically cleaned my room and dungeoned for the next 3 hours. 4 hours. I say lethargically because the job should have only taken me 3 hours, but in my sickened state, everything went just slower. After that, I attended a trip meeting where my throat really started hurting and I lost my voice. But we did play some video games, so that was good. I have also been commanded by Joe to never lose my voice again because apparently it makes everything worse. Oh, but also Caleb's case is looking pretty good. I've got to be real. I honestly thought I was going to win the phone case crafting competition, but at this point, I'm dubious because this is honestly more aesthetically appealing than mine. I mean, mine definitely gives more protection, but I'm not sure that's what wins me votes. So yeah, I may not come out victorious. So yeah, that was the day that I first witnessed his work and was severely disappointed in him for doing so well. The day thereafter, I finished my weather work on my phone case, and thus was finally done for realsies. Oh, I also got my high school diploma in the mail, so look at me, having graduated high school with this fancy diploma. Boop. You wish you had your high school diploma. I then picked up Grace from school because mom and dad left for the 25th anniversary, and so I'd been tasked with being the resident parent. After that, I attended Ratchet Christie Talk on the critical race theory in its general defense, and it was actually really well done. I think I might care more about racial justice now. Oh, and then a beautiful thing happened. So, first of all, Alan and Liam came over, which was good in of itself. But as I was recounting my Idaho tale and got to the license suspension part, Alan was like, hold up, let me do a bit of research. And it turns out tickets do not imprison you. Tickets that don't imprison you count as minor traffic infringements. And Colorado is one of 3 states in the entire U.S. that doesn't count the points of minor traffic infringements committed outside the state. So I'm literally so lucky or blessed because I won't be losing my license after all. Maximal yay. So that was very good news. The next morning, I watched some anime, came up with the Perry the Platypus parody you witnessed at the start, finished switching over all my data from my iPhone to my new Android, reorganized my clothes, watched some anime with Ben, and then hung out on a super lame way with Joe and Caleb and then slept. The day thereafter, I had to wake up super early, like 5:30, to get Grace to school, again, because parents weren't home, so that super sucked. I then got home to nap, because waking up at 5:30 should be illegal. I then picked up Grace from school and spent the rest of the day watching anime with Ben. Also, I was sick for this whole time, so that was part of the reason why I wasn't productive. 3 days ago, I worked on this life email, and then I decided that I would do something I haven't done in ages: build Lego. And so I spent the next 5 hours or so building this guy, which turned out to work pretty well. Pretty happy with him. Doing small detailed work is fun but hard. I then worked more on this life email, read a bit of the book Michael recommended, and then watched a meh movie with Ben. Saturday was Valentine's Day, so Matt was busy, but Alan and I met up and discussed the book we were working through on Missing Man Physics. I then worked some more on this live email, took a break, and listened to the last live email as I played some Minecraft before picking up Grace and talking on the Minecraft server and played Minecraft until 11 at night. Yesterday, I took Grace to church, and once I got home, I cleaned up the house for 4 hours because I knew Mom would appreciate coming home to a clean house. My parents then proceeded to get home. I worked more on this live email before going over to Neo's house where the Bible study was supposed to happen, but it didn't because I was the only one that came. I then talked with Neo and Sydney, and that was a good conversation. And then finally, Neo and I played Small World with Sawyer and their friend, and I got second, which was a big sab. And that's it. The longest life update email in the life update email history. You're welcome.